idea for starting it was that buffalo was a really integral part of their lifestyle as a culture for a long time. A lot of the buffalo got wiped out, as we all know. It was a real kind of genocide against the people and the species. The good news is the buffalo is coming back. There's now 500,000, where there at one point it was down to the low as 500. So luckily some smart people helped protect those buffalo, and they're growing back. I come from the organic food world. I was the founder of Nativa. I founded it in 1999. It's an organic superfood brand specializing in coconut, hemp, and chia superfoods. And so working to help this company. The part of the thing that's exciting is the mission is to bring economic opportunity for Native peoples on their lands. So we have a goal to bring back buffalo to 200,000 acres, and we're focusing in on the Rosebud, Pine Ridge, and Cheyenne River here in South Dakota. I'm new though. I haven't been in the meat business before, so and just getting into this. So I got a lot to learn here, but I'm excited to bring some of my skills to grow this business.
Thanks, John.
Good afternoon. My name is Larry Prager. My home is 40 miles west of here, and there's 50 in a little town called Belfouche, South Dakota. And I'm the regional wool marketing guy. And so I represent another grassland species, truly. A lot of sheep that are on multi-species grazing systems throughout the West. Our trade areas, western South Dakota, western North Dakota, truly Wyoming, Montana, parts of Colorado, parts of Nebraska, a little bit of Utah, a little bit of Idaho. We have a companion warehouse in Billings, and really what our role in agriculture has turned into being is I am the middleman, okay? I am the salesman, really. My key role is I sell the produce from these ranches. They bring it in, they do what they need to do to it, what they're able to do, depending on their environment. It comes into us, and I'm the selling guy. We deal on the supply side with in the neighborhood of 1,500 individual ranchers. That's about how many wool checks a year that we write. And then on the selling side, we are supplying the domestic processors in the United States. Our biggest customer is the military, but there's some others too. The smallest shipment I make is maybe 25, 30 pounds of wool, okay, to somebody that's going to have a process for it. Our typical delivery, though, is 44,000 pounds, truckload of wool, one type going to a dedicated supply line. And so somewhere in all of that, quality issues. This morning I missed a point that I'm going to make right now. I get calls every day from producers that are like you folks, trying to maximize the resources that they have available to their disposal. And they want to know how they can how they can maximize the return. What do they have to do? What should they do? And so that's a big part of what I do is I'm going to call it just grower education, okay? A marketing effort. And so don't, just because you're, let's call it quote unquote, your meat buyer's giving you some tough times doesn't mean you shouldn't listen to him, because quite often he's probably got some information that's important to you.
My wife and I started our farm in 2006, and we started it because we were inspired by Joel Salatin and Michael Pollan. We were looking for a way to stay in our community, make a living, and also create some opportunities for other folks in our community. And that farm grew over a 10-year period. We really started hitting our head against the ceiling of the inefficiencies related to a vertically integrated farm operation, where we were trying to do the processing, the delivery, the market development, the inventory management, the farming, and it just was not a lifestyle that we thought was sustainable for our family. And so we started looking for a different approach, and we we had a network of other farmers in our community who were facing, or in the state, that were facing similar issues. And so we partnered with them in 2014 to incorporate formally as a cooperative that would do marketing for the farmers. And it does more than that, but that's fundamentally the value proposition that we have for our farmers, is that we go out and help them increase their market opportunity so they can grow their farm business. And this year we're on track to be around $3.5 million in revenue, work with about 22 farmers across the state, and we do a mix of direct-to-consumer through an e-commerce platform and wholesale business. All of our farms, the majority of our farms are diversified farms. Our farm that my wife and I run does do pastured chickens, pastured turkeys, forest-raised pork, and grass-fed beef, and most of our farmers do at least 2 or 3 of those species.
Great. Okay, Ben, you're up.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Ben Gotchel of Davie Road Ranch in Raymond, Nebraska, which is 15 minutes north of Lincoln, about 45 minutes from Omaha. And I was born and raised on a cattle ranch in the Nebraska Sandhills, about 5.5 hours away from here. But we always had some milk cows. Milking cows is what got our family through the Depression. Being able to sell cream to the folks in town was kind of what kept the ranch going in the 30s. So we kind of always knew that if you did more than just one thing, it could help you get by. But I did not, I grew up that way, but I did not get an education in this. I went to school for English. I got a master's degree in poetry, and I taught college English for a few years before I went back full time into dairy farming. I worked as a herdsman on the dairy that I now operate. I lived in a camper in the shelter belt and took showers out of a garden hose, and the toilet didn't work, so I had a toilet paper roll on a shovel handle, and I did that for several years, and then had the opportunity to lease the place. So I did. I leased all the land and all the cattle, and it's a 240-acre, 100% grass-fed dairy where we process our own products: milk, cream, butter, yogurt, cheese, and we sell pasture-certified or pasture-suckled veal in addition to ground beef, and then we've also recently added pork. So we are animal welfare approved, certified grass-fed, certified organic, and now most of our marketing or our sales goes through a farmer-owned wholesale distribution company, which I'm one of the farmer owners of, called Lone Tree Foods, and we only service the Lincoln and Omaha areas. So it's 100% local. We source products from about 60 different local farmers, everything from mushrooms and honey to grass-fed lamb and bison, and everything in between. So that's become probably our biggest market, in addition to our on-farm sales and our other types of sales that we had done before that.
Great.
So if we just basically had the philosophy, if we couldn't produce it ourselves, we would find someone that could produce it nearby that we could help them sell their products too. So we didn't try to do it all on our own, but we structured the business as an LLC. We structured Lone Tree as an LLC. I structured Davie Road as an LLC, and then I structured my cattle business as an LLC, and then my wife's pork and pig business as a separate LLC. Because I've always believed that if a business can't be insular and self-sustaining and profitable on its own, you shouldn't use the umbrella corporation or company to subsidize failure in different enterprises within that business. And
So I want to recap for our audience really briefly, because you had some really good points here. One, you had this carcass creep in the terms of whey, et cetera, in a way, right? And that you repurposed into another product line. So that's a really smart way to get rid of that in the case of dairy. Two, as you were growing, this idea that not to stack enterprises for the sake of stacking them, but that it needs to be profitable. Pork needs to be profitable on its own, and that's a really important distinction there to success. Correct? Do you agree? Yes. Yep. Okay. Important.
So as far as why we decided to do multi-species, first thing is we started up with chicken, and I'm a big fan of chicken for a lot of reasons. One is, if you looked at that slide earlier, there's like 4 or 5 pieces of chicken in that slide, right? Versus a beef, which is ridiculous. And I think trying to keep complexity at as low as possible is really important in being successful in this business. I mentioned this in the previous session, but this is the only industry where you disassemble a product to gain value, and it just makes for a very, very complex world as you start to piece apart different species. Chicken's good from that front. It's also good from a cash flow standpoint for a farmer. You can turn around pretty quickly, and it pairs well with beef, grass-fed beef. And that sort of segues into another reason why we did multi-species is, our landscapes in the Ozarks and in Arkansas is, a combination of pasture and forest, and it works well to have, the pastures are not particularly fertile. It's not like a place like here or the plains. It's rocky soil, and we've been able, the combination of chickens and cattle have gone really well together. We've just recently got some tests back, and over a 4-year period, we increased our organic matter in a couple pastures we sampled by about a little over, took it from about 2.5% almost up to 4%. And it's in a very light, sandy soil, so that's pretty good for that kind of soil. So that was exciting to see. And I think it's that combination along with the grazing management style. And then the forest goes well with pork. So that's really, then another reason is when you go to market, if you're doing farmers markets like we did in the beginning when we started, we don't do them anymore, but, or just direct to consumer in general, it's nice to have that variety. If you're going to local restaurants even, to be a one-stop shop. Now, as you start to scale and look at distribution companies, it becomes, so we sell through Cisco now, our co-op does, and that works fairly well. Even having multi-species, but if someone's pushing you to grow substantially, you got to be careful about what your different enterprises and how fast you jump into that. But and then what was the other part of the question? Oh, the co-op, why we started.
Yeah.
So we. I go back to complexity, I think, is the enemy of the farmer. I mean, it's just, especially in this space, because there's so many opportunities to just make your life nuts trying to chase the marketplace, right? And chase markets and deal with the processing. And it's all such a hard thing to get in place. And so trying to find ways to keep complexity down is important. And so, one of the main reasons we formed our co-op, I mean, really fundamentally, we want to help small-scale farmers be able to stay afloat and stay alive as a farm and really stay on the farm and focus on the farming side, but not be cut out of the opportunity to have a business that goes out and markets to customers. And so the co-op, the grassroots co-op model was a way we saw to try to do that, where Grassroots is a marketing business that goes out and does wholesale sales along with direct-to-consumer sales, and the farmers own that business. It's a farmer-run board that governs the business, and at the end of the day, the farmers retain control. Now, it's not simple. It is. I mean, that business takes engagement from the farmers, and obviously more engagement from the board members. But it's a model that we see is really allowing our farmers to, in many ways, it's actually decreased revenue in some cases for farmers, but increased net margin profitability, because they don't have to deal with all the other, the aggregation, distribution, market development, those kinds of things. And so really we were able to decrease complexity on the farm side in this model, and then hire a management team to deal with some of the more complex parts of, like the marketing, the accounting, the more complex accounting, inventory management systems.
So you both, on this journey, as you were building your enterprises, and interestingly enough, I think it's really interesting that what you're both saying is you're stacking enterprises in alignment with your ecology, right? It's not just a willy-nilly, let's stack some enterprises. It's got to align with your ecology. And most likely, if it aligns with your ecology, it aligns with your neighbor's ecology. And so that allows you to partner. It's the second thing. You're partnering in two very different ways. We have an LLC here, which is for profit, and a co-op. So we'll dive into that in a bit. But I think the take home is that on this journey, you have a lot of products. How do we get it off the books? What has happened in both cases is it's taken a village, really, is what you're saying. Yeah, okay, interesting. So let's flip to the other side now and hear from some people who then come in and interact with these villages that have been built, maybe for the first time. Things like, when you first start to interact with the buyer, et cetera, quality, standards, et cetera. So starting with Larry, can you speak to it all, again, in those early days, and or maybe now, you have a group of 3 here who've come and formed, their own co-op or LLC to band together and get those bones off, whatever it is, the wool bones off the books. They come to you. What is that first conversation going to be like? So set some expectations in terms of quality, product uniformity, pricing premium, et cetera. How do we need to start thinking about that to get the way the offal, these things that might be sitting there off the books?
In our operation, I'll go back a little bit. We're not diversified in any regard. We are a corporation. Our stockholders are active sheepmen, okay? Our directors are active sheepmen. And so we are, we have grown what started as a simple wool pool in Carter County, Montana, with the idea that they were just going to band together. I think there were about a dozen people started in the beginning, and they were major producers. They were progressive enough, and they just felt they had good enough quality wool that they weren't maybe getting a fair shake in the marketplace, not unlike some of you sitting here today, okay? And so they just said, we're going to sell our wool together, but we're each going to get our own, we're going to, each person's going to get what they deserve. And so in the first year they handled about a railroad car full of wool in 1960. And 5 years later they were handling about 10 carloads of wool. And we've grown from there. So to reference your question, because every day people come to our door or I get phone calls either from people we're going to sell wool to or we're going to have a delivery from them, and they ask a lot of questions about quality. And so the first thing that if somebody came to me and said, "Hey, I've got some wool for sale, me and my neighbors, what do we need to do?" Okay, well we've got to establish what the quality issues are, because at the end we sell quality, not volume. There's a big mistake out here that think volume is the answer. I can do a good job for a person with 10 sheep in some cases because they care about what they're doing. And sometimes in a management scheme, they're perfect, okay? And sometimes I've got a semi-load of wool from some guy that really doesn't care, and he's just making a mess of it half the time. I have bales of wool in the warehouse worth $4 a pound. And then I've got a bunch more in the warehouse worth 40 cents a pound. And so the goal here is to move everybody to the top end of that. We can call that value added, but the truth is a lot of times the inputs are the same. It's a management skill, or maybe it's a little bit of genetics, but quite often, and those are the discussions we're going to have right up front. How do where can we place those wools to get them the owner, the producer, the best value? And in the reflective, the other side of that mirror is that in the sales end, we've got to support that with sales so that we know, I'm the quality control guy going out the door. I got to ensure that the customers that I'm going to ship to get exactly what they want at a fair price over and over and over again. And so how you manage that supply chain, at least for me, is a big deal.
Yep. Okay. So John, can you talk to us a bit, because you guys go out and source trim from individual producers, correct?
Well, we about just a little background. We source about 25% of our buffalo from native producers. Though I'm starting to learn that some prefer the term carekeepers, caretakers instead of producers. So that's one of the advantages of buffalo is they need a lot less handling than cattle. But so our goal really is to increase the amount of native peoples that we're buying from to see if we can get that higher. But we work with them and then have it sent to a processor in northern Colorado, and then we buy the trim from that, because there is actually just in Pine Ridge they just started a small processing, but it's like 4 animals a week.
And do you buy? Correct me or tell us. So, do you buy it from individuals, or is it a producer group who is banded together also?
Yeah, we have a producers group, but we're still working. We sometimes buy from the producers, or and then in some cases we also buy from the processor.
Okay.
Yeah. And one of the things that we're learning to tell the story more is the benefit of buffalo. And how many people here are aware of the difference between how buffalo interact with the land versus cattle? Is anybody, few? Yeah, and it's a lot of people may not understand this. I'm starting to learn more about it, but buffalo will roll over on their back and they create this depression, and then that depression, when it rains, creates water, and then amphibians and creates more wildlife opportunities. And also, buffalo tend not to eat the wildflowers and like healing herbs, so you can create more of a food shed where you have the buffalo. And then interestingly, the wildflower seeds stick to the forehead of the buffalo, so they're transporting the biodiversity. And then the hooves cut into the soil and allow the rain to come in. Yeah. And then they tend not to eat the grass, as down to as much as maybe cattle. But so anyways, there's some lot of good opportunities. So our goal, really my goal, is coming on the company is to tell that story more and bring that back. And a lot of the native lands are leased from people outside the reservation. And we'd like to see if we can bring that back and take also some of the native producers who are raising cattle to switch over to buffalo, since that's part of their heritage. Part of the challenge of buffalo take longer, though.
Yeah.
So it's several years before they can be harvested. So yeah, it's a little, and they need a little more fencing as well.
Sure.
But one buffalo person said they like a cow put his head through a fence, and the buffalo tends not to do that. So. So
Yeah, they just demand.
But anyways,
Yeah.
it's I'm definitely it's a different process, and that's part of the learning. Yeah.
In working on this growth phase, coming back to the producer side, one thing I'd like to hear from both of you is, as you were starting out and trying to get things moving through, what was your inventory creep? What were you sitting on? And tell us a little bit about how how that motivated forming the LLC, et cetera. So that will give our audience here kind of a model to understand, okay, I'm sitting on X, Y, Z. This is how somebody else moved forward.
So another benefit that we found to the cooperative structure has been that we're aggregating all of our product together. And the way, just a little bit of background on how grassroots works, we buy whole animals from the farmers. We're not buying pieces, we're buying whole animals. We work with them to coordinate that production. We give them yearly, in the case of beef, it's longer, but contract grower agreements so they can count on what's coming, or what's going to be purchased. We actually even work to set up like we have like a farm in a box model for the poultry side, where we help farmers get going there. But it's pretty well coordinated. So that's been nice to be able to plan that inventory. We know what's coming down the pipeline. And then we have a staff of folks who, someone who's tasked with managing inventory, making sure we understand our days on hand, those kinds of, by SKU.
Cody, before those days, though, how did you get to those days? Because we're not at those days yet.
Okay, the cooperative model is what allowed that to happen. All right, and so plain and simple, we wouldn't, as an individual farm, we could not do that. And I'm trying to give some why, with the co-op, how it's been that structure, what it's allowed us to do that we could never do before. Before we didn't, just had a freezer full of stuff, and we didn't know what was where and how many we had of what, and we didn't even keep inventory. It's how the heck do you keep inventory when it's one individual farm, unless you get to a certain scale, right? And if you get backed up on something like, drumsticks, for instance, like everybody wants to buy chicken breasts, but drumsticks are something that move more slowly. When you've only got, say, 1,000 pounds in inventory, then that's difficult to find a customer for. But it's a lot of volume for an individual small farm, right? As a co-op, if we get backed up on an item, it's bigger quantities than that, and we can go out and have conversations with folks like Epic and try to get, a boneless drumstick into an Epic bar, right?
Yeah.
And so those are, it's given us a vehicle to be able to solve enough volume as a group and to go out and solve those problems. And so, frankly, it was just, inventory was an absolute nightmare as an individual farm. And I think that it's something that, we did back, many years ago. We were trying to find ways to, we couldn't be as flexible with our customers, and we would really focus in on, all right, we're not going to, e-commerce site now, you can go on and order chicken breast if you want to. We do have a subscription model there, but people can order pretty much whatever they want to, right? When we were running just the individual farm, we would try to focus on, all right, you buy into a share for the year. We'll give you more like a CSA where you just kind of get what we have, but we give you some pretty clear parameters, so it wasn't nearly as customer friendly and limited growth, in a lot of ways too. Is that sufficient?
Yeah,
Good.
it
All
does.
right.
So again, it comes back to as you're scaling, what you're saying is that you really get to this point where to get these unsaleables off the books, you have to band together. It's just,
Yeah.
I think that's a big take.
Especially if you're breaking it down into retail cuts, right? I mean, if you're going back to that, whole animal thing,
Right.
And even as a co-op, I talked about this earlier in the day, but if we have a large wholesale customer approach us, we're very careful about how we work with them. And one decision we made early on, we set some parameters that, all right, we're just going to do frozen product, and we've had some customers try to push us out of that. And we've done that once, and it was with someone who was going to do a whole chicken program, right? And that can work, but there's certainly, we found that even as a co-op and growing in scale, and we're still tiny in the grand scheme of things, but even as a co-op, we still have to really be careful about not getting too far outside of some parameters that work for us.
Okay.
Some reasons why we decided that we needed to go through the wholesale route was, with dairy, with milk, it's a perishable product. You can't just freeze it and wait and do something with it later. So you gotta bottle that milk. You gotta make something with it. You gotta do something with it. With the wholesaling, we were like, for example, with our cream. Our vat pasteurizer, you have to have 40 gallons in that thing to even turn it on and use it. And, you get about a gallon of cream for every, depending on time of year, 7 to 10 gallons of milk. So to get enough cream to pasteurize, to even bottle it or make butter with it, you have to divert a pretty big bunch of your milk into that. And then you've got all this cream. And the way we make butter is by hand. I mean, I have a butter churn that I make, and then we pull it out, wash it, and all that. But we hand form and hand work all our butter with wooden paddles, just like the old days. And that's what makes our butter different. That's why people will pay $12 a pound for it. But we have a lot of cream left over. And so the wholesale thing, with Lone Tree, we were able to offer 4-gallon buckets of cream to dozens of ice cream makers in the Lincoln and Omaha area, or chefs that wanted to make their own butter, or people that just wanted to use that, pastry chefs or whatever, that wanted to use it for frosting and things. So that was one real big benefit for us. But then on the beef side of things, aside from the dairy bull calves, like the Jersey bull calves, which we found that the raising them out to 400, 500 pounds, butchering them directly off the cow, that was what we were doing for years for direct market. Like there's a significant portion of Lincoln, Nebraska is an easy town to live in. So a lot of refugee communities get relocated there. And one of those communities that happened in the 90s was the Bosnians. And they love veal, and they love to butcher their own calves. And so we got hooked up with them years ago, and a lot of our bull calves, Jersey bull calves, go to those guys. But we discovered that was something that chefs were looking for too. And so, you take when I was growing up, dairies would just give away their Jersey bull calves. They couldn't get rid of them. I mean, if you had to pay $10 for it, for them, it was unheard of. But so we were able to take something that most dairies consider to be a byproduct, actually, which is kind of sad, and turn it into a really high value added product that actually when it came time for us to get our certifications, like our grass fed and our animal welfare, we were already doing those things just because we didn't want to spend money on these byproduct calves. I mean, we didn't castrate them, we didn't dehorn them, we just left them on the cow for 8 months and then butchered them. And so that wholesale market opened up we were able to utilize all of our supply that we'd had on the dairy as a result of increasing, the number of cattle we were milking and stuff. But bones,
Yeah.
before bones were cool.
Right, before they were cool.
Yeah, before
what did
they
you
were
do?
cool. Yeah, we worked with, I actually had a couple chiropractors that were really preaching the word of the GAPS diet, actually prescribing to their patients to come buy our bones and make broth. And they were specifically looking for grass-fed, specifically looking for organic. And so there was a point where we partnered with a caterer to make broth for us in 80-gallon batches that we would then retail in pints. And chefs wanted that too, because that eliminates, how much time it takes to make bone broth. Chefs don't want to take that time. So if you can sell them gallons of bone broth for a good price, they like that. So the bones just disappeared. Now I don't have any bones in my freezer anymore. They're sold before I even get them. So that's been a real good thing about that.
I think what you both are saying, and I want to dive into just a little bit more, is that again, you guys are saying we because you have a co-op and an LLC. But as you're talking, it really comes to light for all of us out here who are maybe still individually working. There's no we, right? So it is hard to manage all these things, and how important it is to get to the we is really what you're saying for these unsaleables, right? And when you get to the we, your opportunity expands because there's more of you working to solve the same problem, correct? So Ben, briefly, I want you to tell us about your we, because you're an LLC and you said there's 5 of you and you bought in, and those are the kind of brass tack details we want you guys to take home. So when the time is right, you can do. How did you do it? How did you get the 5 people in the room? And what give us the details.
Okay, so Lone Tree Foods LLC began in 2013, actually in August, so it was a short start year. We were originally funded by a grant from Golden Hills RC&D in Iowa, and we had a program.
Who got the grant?
What's that?
Who wrote the grant?
We had a coordinator.
You'd already banded together before that.
We had a coordinator. Actually, I had never met the other 2 owners of that LLC before we went into business together, which I would not recommend. But we came together because we all had. It was almost like we didn't have to know each other, because we all came to that project for different but the same reasons. And so the first time I met Mark Rowe, from one of our other owners, was when we were signing the LLC paperwork, which probably is not a good thing, but it's been okay for us. But we formed the LLC with 3 original owners. We added a 4th owner a year later, and that was another LLC that was made up of a couple of guys that were involved in the commodity grain trading market, and they were really interested in what we were doing, and they knew that we had something going, and they wanted to be the finance guys. They wanted to be the money guys that helped us, because I don't understand commodity grain trading at all. But the type of mind it takes to exist in that world is something that a lot of us here in this room would benefit to either find and hire or develop in our own families ourselves. So those guys came on board, and then we had contract. We didn't. Lone Tree had never owned a truck until this last year. We had a contract delivery team, a husband-wife team, where she was actually the sales manager for Lone Tree Foods that was hired. She was hired. She was our only employee at that time, and her husband drove the truck. And so they worked for us for a couple years, and it got to the point where, we just decided, hey, it's going to be better for everybody if you guys come on board as owners. And so that's what they did. And that husband-wife team came on as another ownership share, so now we have 5.
So you had 5. You came in. Your husband-wife team, they donated their labor as equity.
Yeah, it was all sweat equity in the truck.
For those 2?
Yeah, yep. The truck became Lone Tree's. All the expenses and everything with that we absorbed, and their sweat equity that they'd put in. I mean, they were working in paid positions, but there was sweat equity, believe me. So they came on board, and they were invested in it already. We added the ownership to that, and since then it's been a lot a lot better.
And everybody else, the other three, bought in. That's what you're saying,
Yeah,
like
we
a
bought in,
partnership.
yes.
Like
Yeah.
if you're an attorney, you bought in.
Yep, we
Okay.
yeah, we put money down, we bought in, we formed an LLC, and we have owner meetings twice a month. We have different team meetings for the sales team, the logistics team, which is like the delivery and trucking, and then the finance team. And then we have a general manager who coordinates those three things, and then I'm the president, so I just kind of answer.
boss people around.
I just answer the phone,
Yeah.
and I make Lone Tree Foods great again. So.
But so what you're saying is through this LLC, you scale.
Yes.
Because you bring efficiency to your operations because you have one salesperson going out to find Larry and John, right? And so that's really sounds very key to this process. Not that you go, out and find a salesperson, but individually, but that a group of you do, because that's how you bring the efficiency. That's how you amplify.
Yes, most of our producers, and I hate to say the word successful, I like to use the word serious. Like most of the serious producers that work with Lone Tree don't treat Lone Tree like the middleman. They don't treat Lone Tree's sales staff like they work for like their sales staff. They treat it like an extension of what they do. So like when I still do sales calls for stuff that's business that's going to go through Lone Tree. I still tell the story of my products and talk to the buyers and answer their questions and let them meet the farmer and things like that. But then when it comes time to handle the details, I can hand that off to Aaron, our sales manager, and that's just an extension of what I do. And I don't have to pay a full-time sales manager to do that. She gets paid a salary by the company and then a commission bonus based on the sales. So it's in her best
Okay.
interest to help me out. It's in my best interest to set it up so it's a nice softball to hit. But we work together and it benefits both of us pretty much.
Okay,
So.
great. That's great. Anything you can add about the co-op model, Cody? Really thinking about it too. How did you start it? And did people buy it? How did you get people in? Where'd you get money from?
Sure. So, yeah. So we started, but really, I think there are two things that galvanized us in the beginning, or maybe three. I mean, we all had the same problems in varying degrees. But we applied for, as a group, a value-added producer grant with the USDA in 2013. And that sort of gave us a little bit of capital to start to experiment with some things in 2014. Right as we were getting together in 2014, sort of formally, that's when we incorporated, we were approached by a larger wholesale customer on the poultry side. And it was, there was no way one farm could supply that wholesale customer. And so that was really the second thing that galvanized us. And I would say 2014 was the year that we dipped our toes in the water as a co-op, where farmers still had a lot of other things going on, that they were doing their own sales to restaurants and those kinds of things, and farmers markets, whatever. But we had this large wholesale customer that we started providing product to, and we started aggregating and processing together as a group, and that was really there was a big learning curve that year for us. I mean, it's kept going for sure. It's still going, but it was a year that I think was that really is that sort of big bang moment for us. And then 2015, we got enough traction, enough things going. Or actually, it's late 2014, we were approached by a local nonprofit based out of Arkansas, Heifer International. And they were very intrigued by what we were doing. And they were willing to invest in grassroots to help us build our farmer base and our value chain because of our cooperative model, where they could make an investment. They wouldn't invest in one individual farm, but if they could invest in something that they could leverage, they could affect multiple farmers, and if they invest in a piece of the value chain, well, that can end up supporting farmers 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And so that really gave us the initial, gave us our runway in the beginning to be able to start and grow grassroots. We've now, we're still working very closely with Heifer, more on the production support side, helping farmers get off the ground. But we transitioned to more traditional commercial capital funding sources.
Great. So again, a recap is you partnered in power and numbers, really, not only from getting your whey, et cetera, off the books, because it gives you power out in the marketplace, but also in funding, both sides for both of you. So those are important, I think, lessons for us, especially as rancher entrepreneurs, to understand the power of partnership as you are growing, because at some point you just can't necessarily grow as an individual. It's really hard.
Yeah, especially at a fairly small scale. You know, and as a
Exactly.
first-generation farmer, and we didn't come into it with a gigantic ranch with a lot of cattle, we probably would have gone a different route. I'm sure we would have. But it's you really, in our situation, we felt very. We felt that we had to go out and be market makers, right, and figure out, creative ways to get into the marketplace. And there wasn't we couldn't go to a big buyer. We couldn't talk to a company like Epic or really any. I mean, there was no large wholesale purchaser other than like the individual restaurant, or really that was it. That we could scale up enough to hit as our own individual farm, and
Yeah.
so that was really. This has helped change that.
Right. So then let's go again to the other side. Let's all pretend we've done what these folks have. We've formed our little group here and found a way, to say, okay, we've all, I'm going to use Bones again as the example, band together. What is interesting, I think, in these dynamics is that on the producer side, we have to do multi-species stacking in terms of production and in terms of sales for profitability. On the wholesale side, then you have very specialized buyers, right? Very, very special. We want this one type of one thing in quantity. So one question for you guys is, how do you find us and how do we find you? Because when we're working with all these different products, et cetera, that's a mind shift then to say, now I need to go out and find the one wool buyer for USA lamb. How do we get to you, and how do we start that conversation and pricing? Let's kind of get into the weeds there.
Very quickly, Ben said something that sparked, I think, my feelings. At my desk, I want to be an extension of the production side. Okay, I'm not in an antagonistic role. Okay, I want to help you, get the most you can get. I will do everything that I can on my side of the fence to make sure that we have exhausted our resources trying to get you get your wool in on time, get the checks out on time, help you make good decisions all along the management trail. Okay, and I think that's really important. I'm sure that these fellows would agree that trying to help anybody in the production side stay in business and be more efficient and promote the families of the West or the East or wherever you might be. Family production is a very important role. Okay.
Do you think you're unique in that, Larry?
I'm sorry?
Do you think you're unique in that? I mean, I think these folks would say too, you get called from a pet food company and they just want 10,000 pounds of one type of liver every month for 19 cents. So, it can be kind of hard.
I'm not in the pet food business.
I know, well,
but
any business.
But I would tell you this, in the business that I'm a part of, it is a very rewarding production group. I mean, the families, they work hard. They're great stewards of the land. They're great stewards of the environment. They utilize the grasslands. They're not, we heard the term raping the West at some point. I don't see very much of that, if any. And so how do people find us? They do pretty easily, okay? And I think that my bottom line would be that it's kind of a responsibility of ours, I think, to promote that whatever we can do to promote that legacy, I think, is what I would concern. That's just an important thing, a very rewarding part of what I do.
That's a big takeaway from me out of doing this panel is, in a way, in both cases, you're producer founded, you work with a producer group. Producers have banded together to take control, in a way, of their supply chain versus trying to always service somebody else. Okay, John?
So, they started this, the company started out 10 years ago with, tribal producers and to come together to create a market. And this originally was the Plains Indian original food was dried buffalo meat, berries and salt. So they originally created that, and they were growing really fast for a while. And then, some larger, corporations came in and took a bunch of the market share. So they've been kind of challenged with that a little, and so that's kind of where I'm coming in to help grow the market and grow our share. So we'll be in a position to buy more buffalo. But it's the food business, especially the consumer packaged goods, was what we're in a little different than different cuts of meat. It's a pretty ruthless. I've been in it 19 years now. Dealing with the Costco's, the WalMarts, the Amazons, the Whole Foods, the UNFIs, and I could go on and on about what happens in that world. You try to get a little bigger, and you make a few mistakes, and they're always looking for margin. You're as a supplier and a vendor. Their CFO, their number one job, they just say, is take our vendors' margin, and they got a lot of creative ways. And the owners of this company have been kind of taken advantage of from those people. And I have my battle scars in that for the last period of time, so I kind of understand how they play a little, and so got to try to move it there. But that's really our goal is to bring this back and. I've been involved in the regenerative agriculture movement for 5 years. Learned a lot from people like Gabe Brown and Ray Archuleta. I just want to say this is a great conference, and those folks here, they're interested in grass. To me, you're the most important people on this world going forward if we're gonna make it. I've been an environmentalist for 25 years, and I spent a lot of time looking at what's going on in the ecosystem, and it's a lot worse than the scientists and the government is saying. Also the good news is the scientists say, and the people who've studied natural systems, the number one way that we can balance the climate is to bring that carbon back through grasslands. And I get in a lot of discussions and fights with some of my vegan friends, on the coasts. And but then there's a lot of vegans that are starting to understand that they want a regenerative vegetarian diet. It doesn't have to be either or. So if we're going to eat meat, do it in a regenerative manner. So this is a really exciting time. But I think, learning from these two gentlemen over here about how they banded together really encourage how you need to think about that on a localized scale. And I'd mentioned earlier in a panel, I was at a meeting, and there's a lot of high net worth people, especially out in California, that believe in grasses, and they want to invest, but they're not always quite sure how to do that. But getting a little more scale and connecting with your neighbors and other ranchers and farmers is important. But definitely I see a lot of opportunity on that, and I'm excited to participate in this pasture-based industry.
So I think nobody here would disagree, John. I think that what we have these minds here together in this room is to say yes, but we got to make some darn money at it. And that's why we have these fellows and you guys to help us understand how we do it and not lose our pants at the same time, right? So in that vein, back to you guys, I want you to, again, harken back and think about, tell us what, as you stacked these species, what you were surprised at in terms of these cuts. I'm gonna really think back what turned out to be super profitable and what turned out to be, well, it's okay. Because I think there's some interesting dynamics there in terms of what you think is going to drive your business versus maybe what does. Do you guys have any insight on that? Or?
Well, I'll just go back to bones. When I first started, I didn't even figure bones. I didn't even figure bones in the total poundage of my finished product weight. And so I didn't really, I had my price structure that didn't even take that into account. And so when all of a sudden I could sell knuckle bones for $4 a pound and split shank marrow bones for $6 a pound, I was like, well, maybe I should just keep those out of that still and just treat these as bones and organs have been a pleasant surprise in recent years. But honestly, I don't know what it is about people in Nebraska, but I think they eat hamburgers for lunch and steaks for dinner, and that's it. Like the roasts.
That's the average consumer.
The roasts, the briskets, anything with a bone in it.
Nope.
They're like, nope, we don't know what to do with that. I don't know what that is, but it's too expensive. We don't want it. So like, you know, being able to market that to people like the chefs at a hospital, like the chefs at Google, like the chefs at the University of Nebraska training tables, you know, that want bison, that want grass-fed beef, and they want to make, you know, 800 servings of roast beef sandwiches for the Husker volleyball team tomorrow. And we've got 5 different guys that are grass-fed beef folks that can bring that together. But yeah, I mean, organ meats and bones, like they just,
But
we never would have thought.
What scale do you need to be at? I mean, again, you know, if you're going to make these individuals who want it, they need a lot. So again, we're talking about being an individual producer, and maybe I'm sitting on 500 pounds, but what scale are you selling a lot of bones out at? What scale on your organs are you selling them out at? So we can have perspective of what that looks like.
Recently, the largest sale of, for example, beef liver that went into, actually did go into pet food and went into making dog liver treats. I think I delivered 240 pounds of it.
Oh, okay.
Which is not a lot. You know, because we've been selling it. You know,
Is it ongoing? Do you have an ongoing contract for that, or is it?
No, we don't have a contract for that particular thing.
Great.
But I want to kind of go back up a little and talk, because we talk about what scale do you have to have. Like, just because you dangle a bigger worm on your hook doesn't mean you're going to catch that fish.
That's true.
You know, so you got to have the worm that fish wants. And so I can't stress enough how important it is, and I said it in the earlier one, you really need to sell your product before you even have it to sell. And a lot of people say, oh, well, you got to have samples and all this and that. Yes, you do have to have those things. But you have to develop a relationship with the buyer. And that's been the number one focus with Lone Tree Foods, aside from sourcing local products, is developing relationships with buyers. Because if you don't have relationships with your buyers and with your producers, with your suppliers, it's not going to go anywhere as a small, you know, shoestring budget LLC. So when you have that relationship, you don't have to have the scale per se. You have to have the knowledge that you will have a product to sell when it's ready. And so when you know that you can sell 1,000 pounds of brisket, when you know that you can sell a semi-load of bones, you know, then you can go out and get and utilize those relationships to get the things that you need to keep your, you know, to make your sales and to keep your business going.
So cultivation of that's like the first step.
Yes, absolutely.
Cultivating your external relationships.
Absolutely.
Great.
That's the number one benefit we have over U.S. Foods, Cisco, other places like that is the local relationship, kind of family style way that we do things.
Pound on the pavement.
Yeah.
Yep. What about you? What did you find as you were starting out and moving forward? You know, stacking your species, seeing great returns on your land, but what were you surprised in terms of profitability and your sales, et cetera? Surprised and somewhat disappointed at in terms of your market maker, your profitability, et cetera?
So, I mean, chicken feet. Everybody, I never thought that we would sell so many chicken feet.
And how many? Again, give us a sense of scale.
Well, you're talking, we'll do close to 100,000 chickens this year. So, you know, you're talking about 200,000 chicken paws. So not a lot of weight, but it's amazing. I mean, we can't, you know, we sell them online for $15 a pound, I think now, but, or.
So do you have a retail customer?
We do both. I mean, both, yeah.
Okay.
So well, and then something, so lard, not lard, but like pork fat, right? We got backed up on that recently, and we ended up with, and I think we were able to sell. We found a market for 8,000 pounds of. Yeah. You don't want to have that in the freezer.
How many hogs is that?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
A lot.
Yeah, a lot.
Okay.
And I would say, and it was actually ended up being a good, solid margin for that sale, but it took us a while to get there, and we had to have enough volume in place to be able to do it and to find that customer.
Yeah.
It was wasn't in Arkansas, and so that was something that we have moments like that, and I would say that as you grow your business, and I don't have the formula here for how you match this up, but you get more inventory you got to keep up with, and you've just got to have that right ratio of attention to that, because you can easily just end up, oh gosh, I have a bunch of pork chops I didn't realize, or whatever it might be, and so you have to make sure that you invest enough in that side of things, because your margin for error is small, because you have so much invested in it as you grow, so much cash flow tied up in the inventory. When you're smaller and you find a package of pork chops at the back of the freezer, it's not that big of a deal. If they've aged out, you can go eat them, right?
Yeah, right.
Who cares, right? But it's actually a good thing, right? Yeah, it's like, let's celebrate with out-of-date pork chops. So we've done that many times in our family. But if you are, if you're in a situation where you got a pallet of pork chops stuck someplace, or 2 or 3 pallets, and no one's paying attention to that, that could be a big problem.
That's right. Absolutely.
And being able to, just making sure that you're investing in the business to be able to monitor that.
So what you're saying is that as you grow, maybe your biggest, not surprise, but in terms of profitability, is literally watching your inventory.
Oh my
literally
gosh,
watching that inventory in the flow.
Cash flow, forget profitability. Just keeping cash in the bank, right? And that's a reason to do this. Like, you got to do everything you possibly can. And it doesn't mean that does not solve the problem.
Sure.
But if you don't have that data to be able to say, all right, oh my gosh, I've got 200 days on hand of X product, then you don't know to go out and put pressure on trying to sell that. And then when you have a conversation with a customer, it's not very educated if you don't understand what your days on hand look like on that particular product and what future production lines up with that. Now, that's a complicated thing to figure out for any business, but it is something that as you grow and start to have bigger conversations with bigger customers, you've got to be able to get your head around.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, that's the number one question that we get from wholesale buyers, besides how much does it cost and is it any good, is can you get us this much every single week from now on?